I also think that the question, what do you want, is a really difficult one. And sometimes a whole coaching process can dance around this topic of the client not being able to figure out what they want. And that alone can be an incredible journey to support someone to figure out what's important to them. And that's a question that a coach can also hold, that I can hold with deep curiosity. I can be just asking myself as I'm engaging with a client, what does this person really want? We don't ask the client why, we don't ask them this question, but we sit with this curiosity with ourselves. And I think that what do you want question is something that is worth keeping as a foundation.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
What makes a good coaching question? This question seems somewhat basic, but I think it's still super worth exploring on this show because, of course, the most fundamental tool of all coaching is the question. And this question about questions is what I explore with Stephen Nock. He's an American coach living in Berlin. He's the founder of And Joy Coaching, and he's also, in my words at least, the question guy. He's the author of the What Else coaching cards. And since we met at an ICF coaching lab last year, questions have been sort of the ongoing thread that kept us together. So today we dive in and we get practical why what often works better than why or how in coaching. We unpack the 7 questions from the book The Coaching Habit and how Stephen uses them in coaching and also outside. And we also look into Stephen's method for crafting questions, journaling, of course, also do something that we do often on the show, but that still somehow came unplanned. Stephen coaches me a bit on what is the question that I need today. This took me somewhere unexpected, and of course, we debriefed the process, looked into how Stephen came up with questions, and also why maybe what's underneath those questions matters much more than the question itself. So let's get going. I would say let's hop right into it. And I'm asking you, in the context of coaching, what makes a good question?
What makes a good question? I guess there are some basic things that we could jump into and answer. It's open question. I think we've all probably learned that. It invokes curiosity. Oftentimes they start with what, so that was a good question. And it's probably on the shorter side, but I think beyond those things that we could put on paper and put into a bulleted list, there's a lot to do with a question. That's how it's asked. Does it reflect a listening and an awareness? What is the intonation of the question? And I think above all, let's just drop the word good. There's an assumption there that there are good questions and bad questions, and that there are, even if we want to ask better questions, maybe we need to drop the idea of having a better question. It reminds me of a saying from Dr. Ellen Langer. I think she's the sort of mother of positive psychology from Harvard. And she said, rather than focusing on making the right decision, focus on making the decision right. I would think about the same thing with questions, because rather than focusing on asking the right question, we can also focus on just letting the question be right, trusting the client to tell me as the coach, is that a quality question? Trust the question itself to tell us the quality of the answer. I think if we're focused on good questions, bad questions, better questions, we very quickly fall into what I would deem analysis paralysis. And that's connected to what's the right decision. I have to, look at all of the data points, look at all of the options and all of the possibilities for what a question could be, in order to figure out what's the single right one, what's the best one. But in the moment, I think is not really the time for that. We can reflect on the client interactions and the coaching experience later, but in the moment, I think the right question is the one that comes up. And I have so many also, I think, really special moments when I ask a question to a client and then they come back with, oh, are you asking something slightly different from what I asked? And I think, yes, You've just told me the question that is actually more resonant with you and what you want to speak to. So,
yeah, cool. So what I'm hearing is that it is not so much about the question itself, but about how we ask it. So kind of the tone, and I guess also the attitude that's underneath that shapes that tone, I guess.
yeah. And I heard your question, what is a good coaching question, in a very curious way. But we could also ask that, Tobi, what makes a good coaching question? That comes across with more judgment.
Yeah. I think we can dig quite a bit deeper, but let's first maybe look at another thing that you also said, and that is it's an open question, so not one that can be straight answered with yes, no. And also you mentioned something, it starts with what? How about that?
You used the word how. How questions often point to a method. If we ask why questions, we would all love to know why or why not. But such questions generally tend to elicit a defensive response. Who might point toward blaming or shifting responsibility. And so I think what tends to be a more neutral and also expansive form of opening the client's thinking, understanding their perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting one because I have never thought about that in the last 10 years. But now that we talk about it, what I'm also reminded of is my first train the trainer education in 2014. And there, like it was a 2-week education basically. And one of the many sessions was powerful questions, I think it was called. And the main chart that I still remember was a pyramid. And it said basically in the bottom, it said things like when, who, then it said what, a bit further up the pyramid, then how, and at the top of the pyramid, it said why. Basically implying that why would be the most powerful question. And I think we also hear a lot about the question why, like there's the 5 whys and these kinds of methods. And yet you are saying in a coaching context, we sometimes don't want to get out the most powerful tool in a way, because why also evokes this kind of, I guess, especially why not can evoke this sense of blame in a way. Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you tried this? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, I don't think any of it is black and white, all or nothing. And why can also be a great question. And you point to the 5 whys, which for those people who maybe don't know, it's the idea of asking, why is that your answer? And then the person explains their answer and you ask, why again? And why would you explain it in that way? When it's used as that sort of tool, I think it does evoke a lot of curiosity and become a powerful tool. But if a client says, yeah, I want to talk about this topic, and we say, well, why is that important to you? It could come across that they need to defend their reasoning. Whereas a very similar question might be like, what makes this topic important to you? Same question. It's just there's no need to defend it.
And how about how?
I think how often points to a method. Maybe we can think of an example. How would you like to achieve the result you're looking for? And then they immediately need to come up with an answer that suggests I have a method and approach and I know the way, which oftentimes if people had those type of things, then they probably wouldn't be in conversation with us.
So in a way, I guess if we would want to put it in some sort of order or structure, and I heard you say, let's not do that, but I will do it anyway. What we could do is to say, maybe in the early stages of a conversation, we want to figure out the what, kind of what is the goal, where do we want to go? Along that, I don't know, before, after, I guess that really depends on the context. We could go into why, like what is the reasoning, the purpose behind. So why is kind of the digging deeper one. And then how is more about the execution. How can we do that? How can we get there? And so that is more already in the sort of planning, making things happen stage.
Yeah, and that structure, I think we could put those labels on it, and we could ask all of those questions also with what. How would we get there? We could also ask, what steps might we take? But it also gets a little bit more granular and specific, whereas how can be very vague. So we
Yeah.
can think of it as what, why, and how, but we can still ask the questions also in a different way. And I think this type of thinking is worth our time and attention, to pay attention to the language that we use in the question. And I guess the saying goes that with great power comes great responsibility. So if we have really powerful questions, we need to use them responsibly.
Cool. So yeah, for me, you are the question guy. How did you become the question guy? And who are you besides all that?
It makes me wonder when I became the question guy. I think I lived a life where maybe questions and curiosity were encouraged or rewarded. I think there was a lot of curiosity in me as a child, which also made me think, how often do kids ask why and why not? And the parents get exhausted of it. And maybe that's why we have this defensive inclination. But I had a lot of curiosity as a child. I remember in particular, I asked my mom, what is the name for this little valley, this skin between our nose and our upper lip? And she was like, I have no idea. We had a neighbor who was a doctor, and she went off and asked him. But I just had a lot of questions about the world. Also, how I showed up in grade school, not afraid to sit in front of the classroom and engage with the teacher. And so I think that was fostered from a very young age. So I think it was my childhood, also my educational experiences, going into university. I studied engineering, and I think you did too. And there was a certain type of problem solving that was encouraged, a solution that we were expected to have. But I sometimes thought creatively, and I thought out of the box, and I wasn't afraid to question or challenge the norm. One of the professors I had, who became a very beloved mentor of mine, Bert Swersey, he taught us to really question. And this was like final thesis year of my bachelor's study. And he showed me that there's something different that happens in the brain when we start asking questions just to ask questions that leads to another question. And, if we ask this, then what about that? I think the original exercise was to ask questions about trees or paper clips and write 3 pages of questions. And what I learned from that exercise is that the first question is not always, or the 10th question is not always the one that I'm most curious about. And I can keep purely questioning and purely stepping into curiosity until I figure out, this is something I'm really curious about. So my education, and I think also my professional journey, I worked for 12 years in technology startups. To be successful in entrepreneurship, in doing something different, in starting, you have to be willing to question and sometimes go against the norm and also face hard questions. I think the best companies that I've worked for are the ones that are willing to face the challenging topics head on and not try to conceal things or sneak past obvious challenges. And I also learned through those various working experiences about the importance of psychological safety, which reflects environments where it is safe for people to ask questions. And I learned that environments where it's not safe to ask questions are a no-go for me, because I have a lot of questions and I want to ask them.
Nice. And maybe most important question first. So how is the bump on my upper lip called?
True. I don't know the German name for it, but in English it's called philtrum. Philtrum.
Okay. Wow. So this was already worth it, I guess. Nice. And how did that influence, like all these influences, how did that shape your approach to coaching that you follow today?
I think it supports me first and foremost and above all to maintain curiosity, to not necessarily trust the client's first answer as the right answer, to stay with them and to stay curious and really say, okay, I'm never really fully going to get this person, so let me keep wondering and keep asking.
So we're kind of back at the attitude, the foundation of curiosity in a way.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, to make that a bit more practical, I think one experience that we also share, and that has definitely shaped my view on questions was reading a book by, I think it's also Stephen, right? Stephen Bungay?
Michael Bungay-Stern, yeah.
Michael Bungay, okay. The Coaching Habit and the Advice Trap. And right now on the ICF book club, we are reading the Advice Trap, which is, I think, the sequel to the Coaching Habit. And the Coaching Habit, it's like this relatively thin book. And what I loved about it is how it brings coaching, the attitude, and also very practical questions into sort of everyday life, into leadership life. And I think in the end, the book is merely a collection of 7 questions. And basically he talks about them and what makes them powerful and how to use them. And I would love to unpack that a bit and see maybe what that means in everyday life and in the coaching practice.
Yeah, and truth be told, I haven't read The Coaching Habit. I've only read The Advice Trap, but he includes the same 7 questions, which I think he explains there were originally 100, then there were 20, then there were 5, and then there were 7. So I've only seen the list of 7, but they are quite provocative questions.
And I think he also has an order to them, and maybe I just quickly read them out as I have them in front of me. He says there's the kickstart question, which is what is on your mind? And then there's the focus question, that is what's the real challenge here for you? And I think the for you is an important part he often stresses. There's the foundation question, what do you want? There's the lazy question, how can I help? The strategic question, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? There's the learning question, what was most useful for you? And then there's the or question, I think he calls it, I'm not sure, which is and what else? And I guess that's both our favorites. I think that is when I read the book a few years ago, that's the one thing I took away from it, like really the power of asking and what else? And you, I guess, we have never talked about this, but I guess you also found it quite powerful because it is also the name of your business.
Not my business,
no.
but my card deck, yeah. I named my business Enjoy Coaching, which I guess has similar origins. The questions, to be honest, my ego was a little hurt when I read the book and I saw he landed on what else, because I thought I had discovered the power of this question, but I think many coaches see the value of asking a client, what else, what else, what else?
Mm-hmm.
I had one client tell me recently that, the second wave of ideas that we came up with, that was the best set. And that was because I kept saying, okay, what else?
Mm.
And the client will tell you when there's no more, when they're done.
Yeah. So in a way, this is the idea generation question, because you always say, okay, and what else?
Yeah, and he has some combinations, some ways of pairing them. What's on your mind and what else? If you feel like you haven't gotten the client's full story of the present moment. He has several different pairings and combinations. What I think is also noteworthy, you pointed it out with the focus question, what's the real challenge here for you? He has a line in the book that I don't think comes across so well in the book because it's in writing, but he talks about this English expression of putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable, which is a play on putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. And each of the questions, you can play with the intonation there. What's the real challenge here for you? Or what's the real challenge for you? So there's different ways you can play with it. And I think we could do the same with what do you want? What do you want? Or what do you want? You've told me what you think is important to other people, but what do you want? Mm-hmm. Or we could emphasize want. What do you want? Because maybe you're not sensing what the client is really hungering for. But I think altogether the questions, what makes them work, they're concise. So we don't need to elaborate on that. They're concise. 6 out of 7 of them are what questions? 5 out of 7 use you, and only 1 of them uses I. So they're really client-centric. And the I question, how can I help? It's focused on the client acknowledging the coach's presence, and the rest are really encouraging the client to think out loud and not the coach is there. as an entity.
Mm.
So I think those are some of the strengths of his questions, and they're really versatile. He has these different combinations and pairings, and I almost think of it like the standard IKEA toolbox we all need in our households, but you need a wrench, you need a hammer, you need a screwdriver with some different bits, and if you have those basics, then you probably can take care of 80% of your needs.
Yeah. Cross-reference it to other things in other questions, other phases of coaching that we have. So for example, if we look at the what's on your mind, I guess this is sort of the what did you bring today? What's the contracting phase, right? What should we tackle? And if we look at the lazy question, how can I help? I was almost inclined to say, well, this is not a question for coaching. This is more like for the leadership context. But actually, this can also be sort of the partnering question, right? The who can I be for you? How can we make those next 60, 90 minutes useful for you? So in a way, those actually would also run really nicely together in this early contracting partnering phase.
Yeah, I think the how can I help is very much a contracting question, so that the coach is not so that they're holding the client with the responsibility of guiding, direction, explaining what it is that they feel that they're needing, lacking, it's connected to, okay, what's the real challenge for you? And now that we've acknowledged the challenge, how can this conversation be helpful?
Yeah. While the what do you want is sort of you just mentioned it, right? It can be like, what do you want if maybe we have a client that talks a lot about what is expected of them, what they quote unquote must do. I think then this could nicely shift the focus, or we put the emphasis on the you, and then it's like, okay, again, zooming in on what's in your control, what do you want to bring? Nice. What else do you see there? How did you experience those in your own practice?
I like them so much that I put them on a Post-it. And sometimes I reflect on that and just glance on it to see where am I, both inside and outside of coaching. Yeah, I also think that the question, what do you want, is a really difficult one. And sometimes a whole coaching process can dance around this topic of the client not being able to figure out what they want. And that alone can be an incredible journey to support someone to figure out what's important to them. And that's a question that a coach can also hold, that I can hold with deep curiosity. I can be just asking myself as I'm engaging with a client, what does this person really want? Last year in the book club, we read Marianne Franklin, The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching. And she encourages coaches to ask, why is this person telling me this? We don't ask the client why. We don't ask them this question, but we sit with this curiosity with ourselves. And I think that what do you want question is something that is worth keeping under us as a foundation.
So if you're saying we as coaches have in our mind, why is the client telling me this? Then it's because it might give away an answer to the what do you want in a way, or it is sort of looking for this underlying motivation.
Yeah, the underlying motivation, the end goal. What are we working toward? What is this person aspiring towards? Something that they presumably want to have or obtain as an end result that for whatever reason doesn't seem to be within their reach at the moment.
How about what's the real challenge here for you?
What about it?
How do you use it?
I think that question helps me to not assume that I know what the problem they're experiencing is. So they've told me their story, they've told me what's on their mind, checked in the coaching session. I don't want to assume that I know the problem or the solution. And so that's a question where breaking down the emphasis can be really valuable, because they might give us 5 problems and we want to say, okay, what's the real challenge? Where do we need to prioritize? What do we need to focus on today that's going to make a difference for you? Or maybe they try to distract us with some topic and we say, hey, I'm hearing that you're talking about this, but are you sure that's the real challenge? So we can challenge them with this focus question. That's why he calls it the focus question, to really hone in on what do we need to focus on. The word challenge we can also emphasize and say, okay, we're hearing about topics, problems, opportunities, but which of these presents the challenge? Because maybe a client has explained something to us and we don't see the challenge in it, or we don't want to assume that the challenge that we see is what they're experiencing, where the words here and for you can be really relevant to emphasize in this particular situation what's challenging for you. Maybe the client is showing us a bit of a pattern that we've seen over our time with them between sessions, but we don't want to assume that pattern is the challenge that they're experiencing here in this moment. And for you, what's your experience of this situation?
Yeah. Looking for the problem. Like if we want to, I don't know, think of the coaching session in a double diamond shape, this is still where we like trying to figure out what is it that we're actually here for in a way, and what is what's the challenge?
Yeah. And I think you know as well as I do that sometimes that's half the work, or even 80% of the work. And there are cases where once we figure out that challenge is, the client says, oh, we're done. Now we've named the problem. We're finished.
Rest is easy. Yeah. Cool. But maybe one that is after that, in more in the sort of solution phase, is this strategic question. So if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? And that is, I would say, the longest one, the most complex one. Are you using that at all?
No. I have yet to find a situation where that really resonates with me. Also because it assumes that we've identified the decision, the opportunity that the client wants to work with. And it feels a little bit closed-minded to me to say, okay, you've decided what you're saying yes to, what are you saying no to? And it potentially, I haven't worked with that question too much, but I see that it potentially reopens the door and the conversation to second guess and to reconsider the yes that I found. But I haven't worked with that question a lot.
Yeah. So if you want to sort of wrap up, or if you're happy and you have the feeling the client is happy with the result that has been achieved, maybe that's not the way to go. In its defense though, how I can see it useful is this like question of priorities and awareness that you cannot get everything all at once. And then I think I'm a person who tends to say yes a lot, not being aware that saying yes to A also means other things will suffer inevitably in a way. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think a similar question that I sometimes work with, that's, I guess what I don't quite like about this question is also that it's yes or no. And so it feels binary. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Could say maybe, or I don't know, or many other answers. But another question that I like to explore is like, what are the costs and benefits of action or inaction?
Yeah. Like what's the cost of this path? And maybe that's a nice transition, because now you said, okay, well, I'm not using that one, but I have like this bunch of other questions. And I know that you do have a big bunch of other questions, because you are also the author of the And What Else coaching cards, which is a deck of questions. Can you tell us a bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, so I created this deck of questions. Each card has 4 questions as well as a prompt, and they're sorted into 6 categories. I created it, I guess, initially as a tool for myself. First, in my own coaching experience many years ago, every time the coach asked me a powerful question, something that really, that I loved, I wrote it down. And at the end of the coaching journey, I was like, what can I do to keep all of these questions? And I guess I have it here. I made this set of basically business cards with some of my favorite questions and statements that came up. And they were all like just random colors. So this one says, how can I position my goals in other people's interest? What is a dream I've always wanted to start? I just collected all my favorite questions and put them on cards, and periodically I would come back to them, reflect on them. And later I started journaling. and I started answering one question in particular every day. Then I would look at the answers that I wrote and reflect on what other questions are behind what I've written down, the answer that I've given myself. What is the question that I'm ultimately striving for? And that's what led me to create the And What Else card deck, which is the prototype that I have here. It's called And What Else because the idea of my experience of the journaling was not to assume that my first answer was the best answer, to keep going and to assume that I might have even more rich insights to explore and to push myself to answer, okay, what else?
Yeah. Which is also kind of the concept of the card set, right? Because it's not only one card, one question, as many other question card sets, but it is sort of a process on every card, right?
Yeah, there's 4 questions, and so the first one invites the user to explore the topic in sort of a big picture lens. And the second question asks for a really simple answer, which sometimes is really good to do. Like, what's your first instinct? So to sort of center a very simple one-word answer or without overthinking it. The third question invites them to shift their thinking and say, okay, sort of what's maybe an answer that you haven't thought of yet? Or if you look at this from a different perspective, what might you see? And then the fourth question is always asterisk, more or less, some variation of what else? What else could you come up with? And they're each a different question. And so someone could do all 4 questions or just choose the card and say, okay, there's one question here that particularly resonates with me.
So basically, first question opening up the diamond shape in a way. Second question giving us sort of an easy win. First instinct. Third question, help me.
Shifting.
Shifting. So if I look at this from a different angle. And last question, a variation of the what else.
Yeah, and we might call that evolving, similarly to how coaching often works. Like, okay, as we come to the end of the process, what's going to be the evolution here for you? How can you wrap this up?
Can we do an example?
Yes, we can, but I think we're going to do it in a backward order, if that's okay with you. Or do you want to do a real example card?
As you like.
If you want me to, you're going to answer the question?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I would ask you to just exhale and also inhale. And when you're ready, you can release your breath. And take a moment to yourself and just consider if you would ask some higher version of yourself, what does Tobi need to know today? What does your higher self respond with?
In a way, actually, what comes to mind is sort of a question.
Okay.
Or it is this notion of what is it that I need? Need in a sort of needs-based sense.
And so what would be your first answer to that question? What does Tobi need today, right now?
This sense of enough, maybe? I am enough.
Tobi needs to be enough. What does enough mean to Tobi?
Enough means being okay without having to worry what others expect or what needs to happen when. Yeah, and having this sense of trust that, I don't know, the other people accept me no matter what.
So there's a connection here between what Tobi needs and your external relationships with other people and their expectations.
Yeah, because I think that's somehow, and I didn't have that on my mind, like when we went into this conversation, and I could give a big background story now, but I'm not sure that's needed. But yeah, even though I feel like I worked on this quite a bit, that still seems to be a big theme. And now at the moment I'm on parental leave for the most part, so that means I'm also less in touch with the team, but still I feel like there's this need to prove myself, to show presence in a way, and also in a way a rigidness to my interactions that comes from this fear of losing control maybe, or yeah, I mean the classics, right? Like the sense of I know how things should be going best, and I have this fear of, okay, things not going that way. Which, yeah, when I say it, even it sounds so stereotypical, boring. So yeah, it's a bit frustrating actually to, not be further in a way.
And that when that frustration comes up, what do you need to hear?
Yeah, maybe some version of this, like it will be fine, you are loved, or something like that. Yeah, and I'm not sure if hearing even would be sufficient, right? It's deeper, right? It is more about this like a feeling. I need to feel it, not hear it in a way.
Yeah. You used the word enough a moment ago, and it often makes me reflect on the question of like, is the glass half empty or half full? And how rarely do we even consider how full is full enough?
Yeah, I guess in my context, I could answer that by defining some level of contribution, but I'm not sure if that really solves the problem, you know? I think it's not really about the amount, but more about the feeling behind. Yeah.
There's almost a version of if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? But I guess if you're saying no to measuring enough, what are you saying yes to?
Just whatever it is enough. And I think that's in a way the solution, not the defining X amount of contribution or is enough. Cool. Thank you.
What question sticks out to you now?
Yeah, maybe it's still this, what do I want? What do I need? And and I think actually, I mean, I just refused it or rejected it, right? It's like if I'm saying yes to this, what I'm saying no to, but I think that's actually also really applicable in my context, like of this parental leave and still being on and thinking about things going on at MetaFox and what I still need to get done tonight. Yeah, and with that, I'm also saying no, maybe to this, spending time with the little one, this unique period, etc. Again, like I listening to myself, I found it even too stereotypical to even say, but yeah, in the end, it's true. So that is maybe the one that sticks.
Yeah, I hear a depth of acknowledging what you want and what you need while acknowledging there are externalities.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't expect this to go this way, but maybe it's interesting now to explore how this was for you. How did you choose to go about this, to ask this or that question?
If you remember, I asked you the question to start with, what does Tobi need to know today? And then you reflected back, I just need to ask myself, what do I need? And I could sense this acknowledgement of, okay, Tobi needs to acknowledge some things that he hasn't yet acknowledged. And I don't think I said or asked too much. It was really just sitting and letting you think. And there was also a moment, I think, when you said, I don't know, and you kept elaborating, which I think is a super strong signal to create the space for the client to not know and to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. So when the client, in this case, I say, I don't know, but then goes on sort of trying to know, hypothesizing, then you say, okay, let that run.
Yeah, I don't know, for me, is the best signal that we are arriving, that we are in coaching, especially in an AI world. There are tons of things we don't know, and everyone is grasping for the answers, but the world would be extremely boring if we all walked around and talk about only things that we know, and we worked in a context where we truly have all the answers all the time. The human mind and psyche feeds on solving the unknown, figuring out things that we have not yet understood. And that is an excellent context for coaching, to work on the things that we haven't figured out yet. It would be extremely boring, I think, if we only spent time talking about what we do know.
Yeah, and it's funny that you are talking now about this not knowing on the client's end, right? Like me as a client acknowledging, okay, I don't know, let me think about it. And at the same time, I would also expect that for you as a coach, this is the foundation of everything, this attitude of I don't know, and maybe I don't need to know, or how do you deal with that? Like what is sort of the fundamental narrative in your mind in this mini coaching conversation?
In our context, I think it was extremely important that didn't necessarily have a plan or an agenda. I have no clue what you were going to bring up as a topic. You said, hey, can we try this out? This sort of multi-layered questions. I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going. I don't need to know.
The funny thing is, what I had in mind back then was, okay, let's actually look at a card. Like, can we go through the questions on a card to showcase that? And then, yeah, this process unfolded. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, if we would look back at a transcript of our conversation, we could do it. We could create your card. It started with, what does Tobi need to know today? And then it jumped to, yeah, what do I need? It was a very simple question. And then there was at least 2 more under there that helped you to shift and evolve your thinking. And so I think that reflects the arc, this sort of explore, center, shift, evolve, that I'm trying to facilitate in every coaching conversation. And we just created that on the spot. But we can also go through a normal card if you want.
Center, shift, evolve. Nice. Yeah, let's maybe do that. Let's do one for in a way closing look at how this can look like on a card.
Do you want to choose a category first? Explore curiously, foster trust, empower.
Foster trust.
Oh, we have an answer already. So I'll take out just the foster trust cards. I think I have your question. This one says, not knowing is an indicator that we have an opportunity to learn and grow. The first question, which of today's unknowns are okay to stay unknown or uncertain?
Did I answer in my context?
You can choose. We can also keep reading and just reflect.
Yeah, maybe in my, reflecting back on our conversation, it's this idea of, I don't have to know how much is enough.
And if you would center and pinpoint one answer, what is an unknown that you feel deeply curious about?
That's the question on the card?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do I need?
What do I need? Deep curiosity. How does not knowing the answer help you?
Giving up, letting go, accepting. How do the Buddhists say it? Like, surrender.
This is not the next question, but I want to ask you, how else does not knowing what you need help you?
Not know. I think what I need, I should know. It was more this, how does not knowing how much is enough help
how
me?
much is enough? Yeah. How does not knowing how much is enough help you?
Well, it makes it easier to not run after a certain bar in a way, to not jump over the hoop in a way, through the hoop.
Mm-hmm. And if I could suggest a perspective, I often like to think, what is the survival instinct here? Psychologically, what about your way of operating right now is in the interest of your survival? And when you don't know how much is enough, your brain is, especially when you have a little one at home, on the lookout, like, could more help me survive?
Yeah, I think that's it. This sort of, I often say that is also in the Franconian, so where I'm from, DNA, this, you're defined by, your self-worth is defined by your work in a way. And it's that sort of underlying belief that's driving me there. How did you come up now with this question?
Which question?
Survival aspect.
Oh, that's just my thinking. I'm not wired, but I like to consider, that's where my curiosity often enters. Okay, we often assume our behaviors and our thoughts are maladaptive, that there's something wrong with me for thinking this. But almost every behavior and every thought that we have is somehow our brain and our body wanting to support our survival. Where could we find an explanation that this line of thinking is some part of you thinks it's going to help you survive?
Yeah, in a way, that's almost a therapeutic approach, I would say. Because it kind of looks back, where is that pattern coming from in a way? How did it help you survive as a child or in your sort of evolutionary past? How did this sort of behavior help you survive?
Yeah, I don't think it so much about it in the past tense as just in the present moment. And I'm not saying that because coaching is supposed to be present focused, but I'm just like, okay, what about this person's thinking? And that was my thought. Okay, you're focused on enough. your brain probably wants you to like constantly have an eye half open for, could there be a little bit more here that's in the interest of my survival? And I love the work of, I think his name's Dr. Mocha Dot, a British surgeon who has a fascinating life story with losing his son. And he developed this philosophy of talking back to his brain. And he named his brain Becky. And he's like, okay, Becky, I know you're telling me that right now I need to do more in order to be enough, but I'm busy right now. We can have a conversation later today at 5 o'clock. So you and your enough chatter here going on, I know you want to help me out, but I don't need your help right now.
Yeah, awesome.
So the fourth question, just to close it out, is what else would you like to learn in the future, but not necessarily soon?
That's unexpected. How to pass this on in a way, maybe? The letting go of enough. So in a way, okay, the immediate thing is like learning it for myself. But then in the end, I think the purpose of it all is also to bring the sense of enoughness into the room, into the team, the family. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for playing along.
Yeah. Do you want to say a few more words about the attitude? Because in a way, when I ask you what happened in our conversation, you said, okay, you didn't do much. You didn't even ask many questions, but you sort of showed this presence. How do you nurture this mindset of curiosity, this present, the not knowing, all of these things? And how can one learn this?
Ooh, I guess it's just a life journey. And it's a journey that I maybe accidentally set out on. I meditate every day, I would say for at least 6 minutes. I also share my meditation journey on Insight Timer and try to reflect a little bit of what meditation means to me. I like to sit with the unknown. I like to acknowledge that the unknown is present. And that's kind of what's reflected in this question too. Like there are tons of things we don't know. What are the ones that we want to play with today? And what are the ones that we want to set aside and leave as unknowns? And I have experienced similar challenges with what does it mean to be enough. I have some similar life stories of being dictated by my work output. But to reconsider that question of what does enough look like today? Because I know I can make myself a to-do list with plenty of things, more than I can possibly complete in a day. I know that there's the human planning fallacy, that humans consistently overestimate time, money, what we can do in a day. But at any given moment, what's important? What do I need to know or not know right now to keep myself moving one step forward, or to be a little bit more present with myself?
And how does that relate to nurturing and bringing the sense to the coaching session?
For whatever has happened, whatever has evolved in me, a lot of what my clients reflect to me without prompting is that they feel extremely calm in my presence, that they feel calmed, that they feel safe, that it's a space where they can think out loud. And initially it really threw me off because people would tell me I was calm in moments where I didn't feel calm whatsoever. And so I think that's something that it brings to my coaching presence, that, you know, this welcomingness of the I don't know, the idea that I don't need to know. I think if I do know in coaching, then I'm on the wrong path. That's when the advice monster, or the advice trap, as Michael Bungay-Stanier calls it, is really triggered and activated. So it encourages me to show up in a way that I get resonance for, and that clients reflect is positive for their experience.
So, and that's where the sense of curiosity, in a way that we started the conversation with, is kind of meeting the enoughness. And you're saying the having sort of walked that path of figuring out your own enoughness, that helps with bearing the vulnerability of not knowing in a way, and of being curious and being okay with that.
Yeah, I think so. And enoughness, the way I hear it asked, is focused on what I would call the debt, the amount that we haven't reached the level of enoughness. And we operate in a mind, in a world that has a lot of scarcity and a lot of emphasis on abundance. We need more. But that's where the glass being half full or half empty analogy is really interesting to me, because actually I think what's in the middle of scarcity and abundance is enoughness. Then the glass is not, we're not trying to fill it up to the top and constantly looking at the gap, but we're giving credit for what is present, what has shown up. When I think about what do I need to be enough today, all of my needs are met. Okay, so this reptilian mind of mine that wants to think about all of the scarcity and the things that I haven't done, it can quiet down. And I can show up in that way to my client as well when they're thinking, well, I haven't done this, and if I don't get that promotion, and this person is mad at me for this, instead of just paying attention to the debt, the amount that supposedly we need to pour into the glass for it to be full enough, what about giving ourselves credit how full we are, how much enoughness we are already bringing into the picture?
Cool. A unexpected turn, I have to say, like coming from questions and curiosity to being enough. Thanks, Stephen. Where can we find you and get to know your work a bit more?
You can look at my website, which I don't update too often, but it's there. It's andjoy.coach, andjoy.coach. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle, username, and fairly active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can follow me. I also have a newsletter that I put out, I'm quite proud to say, just once a month. I'm not going to spam people's inboxes. That's, for whatever reason, it's called And Now What? That's the name of my newsletter. And so you can find it through my website.
Cool. And then there is the And What Else cards on top of all of that. We'll also put that in the show notes. And I think, what you inspired me here, because this is something I wanted to do since a while, is sort of to intensify journaling practice again. And maybe, I think today's experience has inspired me to actually go with this sort of random question journaling thing, which I think I've tried in the past and it seemed random, or I have to give up control, but maybe that's exactly what I need, I guess.
Yeah, if you like the question, you can answer it. If not, you can start journaling and then figuring out what the question you're answering is.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you for inspiring me to unpack where my curiosity comes from. Happy to be known as the question guy.
This was Stephen Nock, and as you heard, all links are put in the show notes. If you enjoyed this, if this was useful, share the episode with a person who loves a good question. And of course, subscribe wherever you're listening. This helps us out quite a bit. I'm also happy to get your feedback on LinkedIn or at tobias@metafox.eu. I'm Tobi, co-founder of Metafox, and I wish you all the best on your journey on asking better questions inside and outside of coaching. See you back here in 2 weeks. All the best and bye-bye.